Welcome, Gunrunner.
Hey everybody, Q&A the Laird here, and I'm back with a hardware review for you. And this week it's something really unusual and also really cool. And I was really pleased with this one. This was actually an eBay pickup as opposed to a marketplace like a lot of the hardware stuff I've been doing recently on the channel. But it was just stupidly cheap, so I couldn't turn it down. Just to give a bit of background, you might remember, those who follow my channel, that I did a video on kind of the consoles that came before the Atari 2600, which I will link up in the top right hand corner now for those who might not have seen it. And in that video I featured the Interton VC4000 and its many variations. The hardware is based on a Signetics CPU. Signetics were an electronics company that were actually taken over by Philips around the time that these consoles were made. So it's quite interesting actually that with a Philips CPU, obviously Philips were doing their own consoles with the Odyssey and Odyssey 2, aka the video pack. So there's actually a kind of crossover there in terms of a couple of early consoles with Signetic CPU being in these, which was produced by Philips. But the funny thing is that the video pack and Odyssey 2 actually used an Intel CPU. So Philips didn't actually choose to go with their own CPU. And I'm guessing that's because the Signetic CPU probably wasn't very good. So there is about 30 different variations of this system. Wikipedia actually has a really good table that shows you all the different variations of this console. In fact, actually I used it in my other video, so I might just stick it up on the screen now, so you can have a look at all the many different variations. And there was stuff like the Princetronic, the Acetronic, the Interton, I think Grandstand made one, Fun Vision. There was just absolutely, Hanimax I think was another one, absolutely tons of different variations. And in all cases, the hardware internally is exactly the same. There's Bertie, he's come to say hello. My oldest cat, he doesn't often appear in videos. The internal hardware is exactly the same. The controllers are near enough exactly the same. But very strangely, all the games aren't compatible with each other. Because some of the consoles in this series or hardware design, however you want to term it, use different cartridge slots, which is really strange. Why they chose, some of the manufacturers chose to use their own size of cartridge slot, meaning that all the games should have been compatible with each other, but weren't. But there are groups of these systems which are indeed compatible with each other. And actually this is shown here because if you look, this one says Acetronic on it, and my console is an Acetronic MPU 1000, but that one says Pristronic. But if you actually look carefully at this box, that appears to be a label, and the boxes are actually identical. So I'm thinking that underneath it does say Acetronic, and they've stuck their own label over the front. But you will say actually at the bottom, suitable for Acetronic Radafin 1292, which I think was the first one that appeared in this range. Pristronic Pristronic microprocessor system. Sorry. So there's nothing on the back of the boxes. Weirdly, absolutely nothing. I don't think the other one's the same. I think it is. Yeah, nothing on the back at all. So how you were supposed to know what the games look like, I don't know. You have to just go by that very vague box art there on the front. So yeah, these are very early console. No one is 100% sure when the first version of this console appeared. It's Some believe it was as early as 1976, which means it would predate the Atari 2600, because if you actually look at when the CPU was developed, it was developed around that time. I think actually a little bit earlier. Um, and there is apparently some hardware that has 1976 copyrights on it. I wasn't able to confirm this as much of my search. It's just people talking about it. Uh, and some believe that they came the year after 1978. So there's a bit of crossover there. But the first ones were released any time within that 2 years. But information on them is quite vague, and no one's really 100% sure who developed the original hardware, and how the very liberal licensing worked. Whether there was somebody actually licensing that hardware out, whether it be Signetics possibly as they developed it, or whether it was just kind of open source, and anyone was allowed to use it, or whether somebody made one and then everyone copied it because it was an easy design to copy. Not 100% sure. And it would be an interesting mystery to solve. But as I say, there's such little information out there, and no one's ever really come forward and claimed responsibility for designing the hardware or any of these systems. Who might know? And pretty much all the companies that made these have gone bust. Grandstand's probably the most famous, but I think the Grandstand were literally just licensing the hardware of other people, remaking it, selling it as their own, like they did with the Fairchild Channel F, which Grandstand also sold a version of as well, and many Pong clones. So a lot of actually people mistake these as being Pong clones when they see them, I think, but they're obviously clearly not. It's a standalone console. So just going back to my eBay steal for a moment, I got this for £10, and it was after I made that video and got talking to some people about it that I thought, I'd quite like to get one of these. And initially I had a look for the Interton VC4000 because it has a really cool design. I love the design of that one. And also, it's the most common one to get games for and stuff like that. It's the most well-known one, the Interton. It seems to be the best distributed. And the Interton VC4000 originates from Germany but was sold across most of Europe. But when I actually looked, all the ones I found on eBay were actually indeed in Germany, unsurprisingly. But they were all very expensive, actually. We were talking between about £70 to £100. I think even more than that when in case of, like really nice boxed ones. So they weren't cheap. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at some of the, the variations. So I did a few searches for stuff like Princetronic and Hanimax and then Acetronic. And this one popped up. And it was on a bid. It's a bid starting at £10. It was listed as untested. I have actually tested it and it does work. So it gives a pretty crap picture, but it does actually work. So that's quite impressive to discover after all this time. But yeah, I mean, it's not in the most amazing condition. You'll notice there it's got some marks, which actually looks like they might have been done by a cigarette or something. Because initially I thought they were scratches, but actually when you look at them closer, they do actually look like it's the plastic's a bit melted. And the blackness on these two here makes me think that it might have been done by a cigarette. Not 100% sure, but there we go. So we'll have a look around the console in a moment. So, let's go back to the front of the console again there for a minute. I'll just rest it on my knee. So we've got an on-off switch, load program, which kind of works like the reset on the Atari 2600, game select, and start button. Home Video Entertainment Center, Acetronic MPU 1000. Acetronic made quite prolific around this time. They made the Pong clones. There's also the Imagination Machine and stuff like that as well. So they did quite a range of of different systems around this time. It's actually not a bad design. It's quite interesting with that cartridge slot there like that. Kind of looks like a lot of computers look like where they had cartridge bits on the side, actually, in a way. But it's angled like that as well, almost like a keyboard as well. Nothing on that side, nothing on the other side either. What we got on the back. So use only with special mains adapter supplied with this. It's made in Hong Kong, and there's absolutely loads of patents for it, which is interesting considering how many different people made this. As I say, maybe they are the original manufacturers of this system. Acetronic could be, but because there is a lot of patents listed on the back of that. Maybe it'd be worth looking some of those up if that information is still available, actually, to find out more. And a sound control there to make it louder. Very strange to see in an early console. Then we've got on the back the two hardwired controllers. We'll go to those in a moment. They can't be unplugged. And a very, very strange non-standard AC adapter, and something there that's been filled in. I'm not sure what that was originally there for. So yeah, that's our TV cable, obviously standard RF lead, as you'd expect. Going back to the power supply for a moment. So we've got a pretty standard 9 volt? Let's have a look. 8 volt actually, power supply. Output 8 volt. Yeah, standard UK plug there with this weird end. I was very shocked to discover that worked, because with a lot of these old systems you often find that the power supplies are knackered. And we've actually got an aerial box as well, which is quite cool to find that still with it, to switch between your TV and antenna. Remember these? Very cool. So you can plug that into there, that into there. There's actually got some screws on the back as well, so someone obviously screwed it into something at some point. Cool to see that in there anyway, so I wasn't expecting it. Now let's go to these controllers. Now you might already noticed, you might look like it was broken to you or something, but it's actually meant to be like that. These are non-centering analog sticks, a bit like the Atari 5200 had. It's a lot like the Atari 5200 had, but obviously years earlier. So it reminded me a little bit actually of the video pack controllers as well, but they actually were slightly different because you could kind of slot it into bits on the side. But yeah, this was the first console to have analog controllers. So again, we hear this thing quite often about some reason. A lot of Nintendo fans think that the N64 was the first system to have an analog controller. It wasn't even close, because these systems had it in the 70s, as you can see. So we've got like keypad buttons. I think there was overlays that you could put over these, and there's your fire buttons. Those two are your fire buttons, and then your thing. So actually, in a way, this controller was pretty advanced at the time, because the Atari 2600 was a single button joystick, and here you are with all of these. I mean, they're not the easiest to use because you kind of got to do this. Yeah, they're quite interesting, and these are in surprisingly good condition and surprisingly good working order. There is two of them, so there we go. Yeah, they work absolutely perfectly. There's nothing on the bottom of them at all. So that's your controllers, and there's not really a lot else to look at in terms of the hardware there. What I will do though is I'll get a cartridge out, just so we can plug one in, and you can see it. Oh, this box is actually coming apart on the side. The glue's gone, and so I'm having a fight with it now. Trying to get it back together so I can put it back over there. So there we go, we've got Olympics. So okay, this tells you a bit more about it on the actual cartridge, because as I showed you, the back of the box is absolutely bugger all. So games So it's got 60 games on it, 1 to 10 of ping pong, obviously, 10 to 20 hockey, 21 to 25 tennis, 26 to 30 volleyball, 31 to 40 basketball, 41 to 60 breakthrough and knockout. So, as you probably already guessed, this is a blatant rip-off of Video Olympics for the Atari 2600. Has all the same pretty much events and everything. They literally just copied it. It's not as good because you don't have paddle controllers for a start. But it goes in, but you'll see it's quite a big old cartridge actually, bigger than Atari 2600 cartridges. Bit wider, bit taller, similar shape, but it has an end label which is good. So that says 1, the Olympics 1. So that makes me think that was the first game released for it, which would suggest that this one obviously doesn't predate the Atari 2600, this particular one, because they've ripped off an Atari 2600 game and that's cartridge 1. But that doesn't mean to say that others aren't, because I say each company had their own system, each company had their own games. Not all the games were released by every company either. So there are some games that were only released by like 1 or 2 companies, some that were released by all companies. And that's an interesting thing as well, because we don't really know who programmed the games and how that part of, did they license them? Did they just nick them? We don't know how that part of it worked either. So who actually made the games and came up with them is a bit of a mystery as well. So let's put that back in there. And our other game there is Grand Prix. So this appears to be cartridge number 2. Again, it's got a label stuck over the top bit of the cartridge, but you can see that's got Grand Prix, Rally, and Track Racing. I can't remember what Grand Prix is. I think I've got some video footage of it, so I might actually have to stick it up in the video now or in a moment so you can see it. I should mention that these boxes they've got quite nice internals actually to hold the cartridges in, but there are no instruction manuals. I don't know if they were meant to have them or not, but they don't have instruction manuals, and I doubt that they probably ever did actually. I imagine that they were so simple games that you could probably work them out for yourselves. And again, there's a label actually on the side covering up, I'm guessing, where it probably said Acetronic, because they've rebadged the same games. So there's not really a lot more to tell you about this system apart from, it's a very, very early 8-bit system, very simplistic games, some of which are, rip-offs of very early Atari 2600 games. Some try to be a bit more original. There's actually some games that come a little bit later that try to rip off stuff like Space Invaders and Pac-Man. So they did have a go at ripping off quite a few early arcade games as well. And once they started to do that, it really showed the limits of this system in terms of what it could do, with graphics and gameplay and stuff. And I'm guessing that they were fairly successful, judging by the amount of different ones there are, judging by the fact that there was games being released for them for quite a few years, and judging by how actually quite easy they are to find online. And as I say, apart from the Interton VC4000, none of the other models actually seem to go for very much. And I think the Interton's the best known one, so that's probably what people search for. But all the other variations like the Princetronic and Acetronic and Hanimax and stuff like that, I had no problems finding them on eBay for various prices. This was the cheapest one I found, which is the main reason why I bought it at £10 with 2 games. I couldn't turn it down. The games do seem to be harder to find than the systems. And I think maybe some people have had loose games and not known what they are, or I don't know. But the games are definitely harder to find than the systems. And obviously it's trying to match up the correct cartridges with your variation of the system as well, which would make it difficult for collecting if you did want to collect for it. And you know, that's the next thing, I suppose, is this system worth collecting for, or worth buying? And not really, unless you're really into early systems. You know, the games aren't particularly great. You're not going to get a lot of fun out of them. I have actually played a lot of the games on emulator. There is various emulators available for these. So I have played quite a few of the games in emulation, and most of them are pretty poor. There's not a great deal to be of fun to be had there. And I think if you'd have got one of these instead of an Atari 2600 back in the day, you'd have been pretty pissed off. Um, so unless you're really into those early systems for some reason, like the Fairchild Channel F and the you know, original Odyssey and stuff like that, then you know, there might be some interest in it for you, but otherwise no. It's really just a curiosity in a case of, oh, look at this old console that I've got. It's quite cool, and the boxes have some quite nice artwork, and yeah, that's about it really. It's not the greatest system to play, and but, you know, if you do want something different to collect for, I suppose it's an interesting one to go for, because I don't think you'd be spending a great deal of money collecting for this system, and it might be quite a thrill actually trying to track down all the games and trying to complete a set. But that's it really. That's well, actually, one thing I do want to mention, I did actually mean to mention, I just remembered, is that there was actually an evolution of this console. It did receive a kind of follow-up, because you may have heard of the Arcadia 2001, which is thought to originate actually from America. But there was a lot of different, again, there was a lot of different manufacturers who made the Arcadia 2001. The best known model is by Emerson Radio, who are a big American electronics company, and they released it to compete with the Atari 2600. They developed loads of games for it, including actually some arcade conversions, believe it or not. They actually went out and got some officially licensed arcade games on it and stuff like that. And the Emerson Arcadia 2001 was basically the same hardware, but upgraded a bit. They boosted stuff like the RAM and the graphics, but I think it's the same CPU, or a version of the same CPU. But yeah, unfortunately, the Arcadia 2001, I don't think it's backwards compatible though. It could have been, but I'm pretty sure it's not. But it's interesting that the hardware was developed further into a more advanced system. And again, as I say, with the Arcadia 2001, there was loads and loads of different people making them. And actually, one I want to mention is Leisure Vision in Canada is one of the more well-known ones as well. But the company probably best known for making coffee makers, Toshiba, they made it's an Italian company, I believe. They made a really cool looking version of this console that's well worth looking up. And I think Zanussi as well, the washing machine manufacturer, probably best known. I think they made a version of it as well, if I remember rightly. There was some really interesting versions of the Arcadia 2001. So there's some further research for you if you want to find out more about this system and what became of it. But that's it really. I hope you enjoyed my look at the Acetronic MPU 1000. Something very different for the channel. And I thank you for watching as always. Thank you to all my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon. Bye bye.